Charlie, is there a
Second.
second? Is there any discussion, any corrections to the minutes? All those in
Look at
favor?
all.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. One abstention. So I think it was just Duncan that abstained, he probably wasn't here.
Minutes and seconds.
Okay, current bills payable, general operating expenses, attachment number 2 in your packet.
Motion to approve the payment of bills, manifest 3011.
Second.
Okay, is there any questions on the manifest? No. Okay, all those in favor of the bills? Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Correspondence, superintendent, board secretary, board members. Mark,
Nobody else, so I have to make sure I'm
that's okay.
ready.
That's okay.
Both Lisa and I had just received something from a dear friend of ours and Lisa's as well, Carol Gerken, about October 22nd at the Meredith Community Center. The Lakes Center for the Arts is going to be presenting Arts Live.
Live,
Live.
yes, and, there's gonna be some really great artisans from the area, as well as, I think they have an author that will be there for the children as well, for stories, and we just wanted to let everybody know out there.
10 to 1, 10 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon
Should be fun.
at the community center. And it's free.
Yes, it's wonderful. Okay, superintendent, assistant superintendent report enrollment, Mrs. Moriarty.
So as we are in transition in our office, we are kind of learning how to generate that report. And so if the board doesn't mind, we'd like to send that to you tomorrow. I think we'll be in a good position. We just want to make sure that we've had a chance to check accuracy and so forth.
Yep. That's fine.
Well, thank you.
Great. Ventilation study update. Mrs. Moriarty, Ms. Temporino, and also Mr.
There's
Swains.
one.
So you may recall that as we began the conversation with the ESSER 3 funds, one of the things we wanted to do is look at locally, using local funds to study our current ventilation systems, to see what would take us to the next level. We have been fortunate that we do have good ventilation, but there are improvements that can be made. And so the study began last year, went into this year. And so Mr. Swanker has some highlights from the study that we'd like to have him share this evening, with some costs associated with that, for consideration, I think a little later in the conversation, about using ESSER funds to help reach some of those potential ventilation goals. So Mr. Swanker, do you want to take it away and we can distribute your handout?
I drew up just a memo laying out what I feel would be the next steps and scope of work once we receive the full engineering study, which we're very close. I think last time I updated that, I had the elementary was complete. They were deep into the high school.
One more.
And we've started Sandwich as well. We're pretty deep in all of it, really, but having a full, complete package is still forthcoming. But from that study, to see where we're at, and going back in time when every meeting was about, how many air exchanges am I getting? How much filtration? How much, beating on it. Now everybody's leveled out, and we're back to looking at and really having a professional engineer, state what we're getting and where we're at, where we stand with our existing facility. So the memo then from that is building on the study, seeing what we have and taking it to the next steps, which last meeting that I updated, we had gone to step 1 with the elementary school and had performed the balancing there and, had drastic improvements. The other schools will now follow. And I've laid out, again, from that next step, each school needs to be balanced before going further to get an upgrade in HVAC after that. So in the memo, you'll see, starting with Sandwich Central School, We're proposing to do the balancing. Probably be performed either late February breaks or get it right in June, because it's kind of disruptive, so I'm going to try to do it when school's out of session. But we'll have the ability February. Second part of the scope at Sandwich would be the recommendation from the engineer to remove a number of exhaust fans from that building that are just an old style idea of exhaust only. They don't really have makeup air, and they rob your building of the heat you're trying to put in. So they thought the best improvement for Sandwich would be to remove the exhaust fans and exchange it with an energy recovery ventilator, which would try to reuse some of that heat that we're putting in the building. And, increase the ventilation to what we're looking for. So I have some budgetary, the entire memo is based on budgetary numbers. Hopefully with enough safety net that they're good for when we really go out and try to bid these things and perform the work. But just so you do understand, we're trying to come with a budget so we know how much we kind of desire to request of the SR fund for use. Next on the list is Interlakes Middle High School. Same idea. We're going back to that step one, balancing. And at the middle high, the next best upgrade would be, there's two areas. There's some ventilation upgrades where we found that ventilation was basically inadequate and not capable of being achieved by some existing components. And those areas are the existing STEAM wood shop, room 10, robotics shop, 40, and then the 3 science rooms up on the second floor. And the reason those science rooms were chosen is because also we're trying to put another priority focus on the second floor of the high school due to the heat difference that floor obtains. So in that proposal of those ventilation upgrades, we did a twofold, and they would get cooling and heating with dedicated outdoor air systems in those rooms that are stated. The next upgrade we looked at was another area of constant heat and inefficiency, and that's our cafeteria and kitchen. The kitchen has a massive grease hood and hoods over dishwasher appliances, and they rob the building of heat because they were not designed with any makeup air for them. So the makeup air is the heated space adjacent that we're trying to condition. So it would be isolating the kitchen and producing a cooling and heating unit for the cafeteria, which often gets very humid and hot and so uncomfortable that it's really not usable. And I think it ultimately would use that space to expand some of our meeting space and usable outside group spaces. We're constantly looking and struggling for just space to have that's comfortable and can hold, maybe 30 plus people. So once we control that environment, it would open itself up to that. Moving on to elementary school. As I said again, that one, we really made some drastic changes. Great improvements in the air. All the existing equipment worked really well. The one piece that didn't work well is that kitchen grease hood again, where it's stealing all its makeup air from the NPR space. So I would propose putting in a dedicated makeup air unit for the kitchen so that it would cycle just air from the space that it needs to. Total budget at the bottom there is for that scope of work was $680,000. I did place a 10% contingency on it. I feel the scope is good, but I'm just worried about, again, it's budgetary and things are moving around. And there's a lot of gray areas when we start digging into projects like this, setting units, finding things above ceiling. So I just wanted to add in 10% contingency, which would bring the entire project total to 748. As you see.
If you didn't do it, you would need it.
And on the next
And then
page,
the last page looking forward, or if funds available, including in, we try to just come up with a unit pricing cost to start cooling all classrooms. And the engineer and I discussed and really came up with that. We thought just doing the ductless mini split heat pump systems would probably the most efficient way to just start providing that cooling. So we try to develop a unit price per classroom, which you would see would come down to around 27,000 per classroom. And then the next heading to explain more is just there's a little bit of electrical distribution upgrade that needs to be done at the middle, high, and elementary to provide enough electrical panels. You know, it was never planned for to have these units powering these. And so the panels are basically full, but we have the proper service in the building. It's just all about reallocating and getting new distribution to the locations we need.
And Mr. Swanker, can you explain why cooling might be beneficial from an air quality standpoint?
Yeah, so the ultimate goal to try to have full climate control in the building is just the comfort level of temperature is definitely beneficial for the students. We get a lot of complaints in the swing seasons about how uncomfortable it gets. Secondly, and maybe even more importantly, is just the humidity control of your building. You know, stopping any kind of mold and bacteria growth by just maintaining a constant proper humidity level and temperature. And in the, I'm trying to agree, we really don't have that many weeks that we don't have people in that building or used by students. Summer blast is 2 weeks after there's a little break, and it's 6 weeks on, and then there's 3 more weeks of break and we're back at school. So for 5 weeks out of the year, and actually, so those 5 weeks we're hard at work resetting the classrooms, and we often need to dehumidify because we're putting finished product in the room and water down. So it's just beneficial to the health and quality of the air and surfaces.
I have a question. So this looks like a lot of moving parts for all the different buildings. And as you said, you know, with ESSER funds, I think they're only good till 2024, right?
Correct.
So we'd have to finish the project by 2024.
September 2024.
Is this, do you think this would happen? I mean, this is a large list. Well, because of COVID and everything, there's been I know that there's been a lot of people running into snags, trying to get parts and pieces. Are you anticipating any problems with that?
I think if we could kind of gather our plan to move forward with these items, we have enough time to implement what's laid out here. Those unit costs per classroom is kind of it's not really on that total, because that maybe we could grab a few. Maybe that's just something we maybe look towards in the future and try to do ourselves at 1 a year, 2 a year, or whatever we feel comfortable with. But the actual scope laid out and what I would believe would be beneficial with the SR funds is attainable if we make the decision and decide to move forward. The balancing portion, I've already tried scheduling for that February break and June right away to get on the list. So from that point on, we have a year and a little bit to get done.
Howard, you were next. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, is there any way to monitor the effectiveness, efficiency of the ERV systems? And secondly, are these systems going to require additional routine maintenance of a custodial nature? And thirdly, if that's not enough, if it's known, what's the estimated lifespan of this equipment? And it's not only the initial cost, but we might need to build, if we do something like this, we might need to build in a rotating replacement improvement management kind of function.
Right. I agree.
Anything you know about that would be helpful.
So we do keep a tracking sheet on our fuel usage and electrical usage. That would show us where the benefits of the ERV are. Yes, we're gonna power the ERV with electricity, but technically we should burn less propane usage with it. So it should become an efficiency that's seen. It may be small, you know, it might not be ground earth shattering type of thing, but it's one of the things that we know, taking a straight old exhaust motor, running it full bore 24 hours a day and sucking the heat out of your building, it just isn't efficient. So, and that's kind of where we're at now. So it may be close to an even exchange, or we should see some savings out of that.
An even exchange, I think.
Yeah, the even
Quite
exchange would be,
commendable.
you're right, because
Quite
the
commendable.
even exchange would be monetary and the comfort level would be beneficial to, right? That would be the benefit of it. You're not feeling that change in temperatures or fighting it with more heat. You're sucking it right out.
Yes.
So, what's the second part?
I was just wondering about replacement.
Life cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I would put a 30-year life cycle and then kind of rooftop unit.
well, I won't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um,
And then, so it would have to become part of some preventative maintenance schedule. But it wouldn't be burden on custodial sides, but mechanical technicians of maintenance, yes, you know,
Well,
There'd be
it's
some
more
additional-
sophisticated, so.
yeah.
Yeah.
There'd be your normal things we have now on the units, which, you know, just your belts, filters, wash down. Controls will be added, and it's figured to have some control connection in here, but we kind of handle that in-house, so there won't be any additional costs being seen once it's up and running.
Now, if I could, Madam Chair, I don't think there's anyone at the table who doesn't understand that I'm already thinking beyond 180 days.
There are some here that may not understand that, but I do.
I think, Duncan, you had a question, then Mark.
It was partially addressed. I guess I wanted to hear a little bit more about the savings from the cafeteria and the kitchens in the two different buildings. I mean, would you put that at a more significant savings that offsets this?
Well, actually, so the cafeteria at Middle High is more of a, there's almost nothing
Going into
in
it?
that room.
Right,
So
okay.
we'd be adding to that.
But
But what we
the
are doing,
benefits are.
what we are doing to it now is definitely being drawn out for a good 10+ hours a day by the hood. But we're really, that one is an upgrade to get a usable space out of it, because
Which
it's
is
very
kind of-
uncomfortable in that.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw my 2 cents worth in. Balancing sounds like a simple word. It is hugely important, especially in an older structure where walls have been moved and everything else. If you have an exhaust, but no outlet to it,
Yeah,
it's gonna,
it has to come from somewhere. So-
and second, as we have learned on our solar array, it's a better deal today than when we signed on to it 6 years ago, because of what's happened to electrical prices and their repurchasing price and everything else. So the dollars that go in, which I've always argued the ESSER fund should go into non-recurring capital improvements to the building. And this is the perfect example of it.
Yeah, so I'm interested in hearing the health benefits of this project, because ESSER funds were intended to not just be non-recurring fiscal plan
Right.
improvements or money saving. They were intended to be specifically focused on preventing future pandemic risk, improving air quality and that kind of thing. So if you
The
could,
basis of the engineering study that we had our contractor do was 100% behind going back to step one and getting first oxygen to the room. So that's the seeing the equipment and then balancing it so that we can actually tell you how many times we're replacing the entire room's air quality with fresh outside air. So that's why the whole pathway here that we took is based on health. So everything is based on getting oxygen, which is the most important, dilution to the room. Then with the air exchanges, what's the highest rated filter I can add to the building that our equipment can handle? And we've done that. And then truly these next ones are the next steps in that area. So we'll know we have the right air exchanges. We'll know we have the right amount of oxygen to them. Now, what would you like to do to them? Would you like to temper the temperature? Would you like to dehumidify? Would you like to scrub it some more with the ultraviolet light bulbs that everybody ran out and bought, or the ionization, or there's all those things do work, but first and foremost, we had to study, are we exchanging the air? Is the ductwork working? Is everything going as planned? So that's where we're at right now physically in the project. And then these other upgrades are just the next recommended area, except for the middle high school scope number 2 on the middle high school. Those are 2 ventilation problems we have that would absolutely be addressed. Those 5 classrooms are areas that are not going to meet the minimum standard that we're looking to get. So the way to fix it, there's a few different ways to go about it, but this was the most recommended quasi, hey, if we're gonna have to fix it, why don't we go right for the cooling and the fix and everything in one shot? So that's this.
Thank you.
And Charlie?
I think this makes a lot of sense, and we ought to definitely do it.
Good to know.
So where does this fit in with the total amount of ESSER funds?
So the next agenda item is actually
Right, we're
to
gonna go to
kind of talk about where we are with
Yeah.
the funds. So that is attachment 4. I think it's 4.
Oh, I thought it was 3.
It's
Three.
3.
It's
It's
three.
pardon me.
Attachment 3.
Attachment 3. So
That's the one is spent. That's the
So
two is-
ESSER 1 is spent. ESSER 2, this looks a little different than when you saw it back in August, because I did shift some additional funds back to cleaning and balancing. We'd had some funds in there, and there's currently some planned work to try to do some balancing. So I shifted funds to that, and that leaves you about $41,000 left of ESSER 2. ESSER
Hold on.
ESSER 3, if you look, your remaining funds is just about $900,000, just over that. So a couple things to point out, that we had, talked at one point about doing the outdoor stadium seating. And some of that changed when there was the retention and recruitment, stipend that was determined. So that shifted. The board did carry through a purchase order of about $126,000 in fund balance from not this past school year, the school year before. And, one of the thoughts behind that outdoor seating stadium style was that we definitely heard from students how much they had missed being able to be together during the pandemic, and being outside in an environment would allow whole group stuff to happen. I think that it would make sense to prioritize the ventilation at this point. And if the board was comfortable, I'd like to start working with a parent group who would be willing to maybe try to fundraise for, I think, we're probably, what did we figure? That's about $350,000 to do the stadium seating. So the board has about $126,000 at this point, maybe with some grassroots trying to raise some funds. Maybe we get closer to it. And then maybe there's a potential conversation later down the road if there's fund balance at another point to help make up the difference. I don't know. But I think that this seems like a pretty complete plan where we're at, and the sooner we could operationalize it, the better. I do want to share with you, because stakeholder feedback is part of ESSER funds. We have it on our website. We've tried to be very transparent. I mean, it's on agendas. We have, tried to put things out there. Some stakeholder feedback was to request some additional staffing. I did respond to that feedback with, I feel like we are able to meet the needs of our current student population within our current staffing, and, with certain things we've done to address, our student needs relative to COVID. The board had supported some changes. If you recall, you had increased some guidance counselor time and things along that line that made a difference. Some of it included, increasing paraeducators, increasing teachers, and increasing nursing. And I think within our current structure, the school administrators and I feel like we are able to meet it, but I just want to at least share that with you because the reality is if the board is inclined to move forward with this, then this pretty much uses up all the money. It is purposely on here, not as an action item tonight, because will give people time to be informed, so that if there's feedback that the board wants to consider, the board can make a decision at the October's at the 25th. I'm using my memory here, which is a scary, scary thing at this point, at your next meeting in October. And I think that gives Brian enough. We do need to, what we can begin tentatively working on is designing a request for proposal, because the reality is the hoops we have to jump through from the ESSER standpoint are a lot. And I think we could, in a parallel way, start preparing ourselves for that should the board decide to do that on the 25th, unless you feel like that's a really poor use of time. But I'm getting the feeling the board is somewhat supportive of moving. Yes.
I would say as an individual board member, that sounds quite appropriate. And while maintaining an open mind about future parts of this discussion, as it is presented to me now, I'm wholly supportive of what you're talking about. I think it makes good sense.
The other thing I would suggest is with the remaining 41,000 in ESSER 2. So our learning management system, which is about 30 grand a year, we have budgeted that through our ESSER 2 funds, and I am correct, it's about 30,000.
I can certainly look that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Parsons. That we have put that in the ESSER fund. That's a requirement. We need that to run. And so that would have to move to our operational budget. This does not seem to be maybe a good year to do that. So my suggestion would be that if I'm correct, it's 30,000, that the board put that into electronic access for another year of our learning management system to be paid for through ESSER money. There would be just under about 11,000 left. One of the stakeholder feedbacks included some teaching materials that might be a good use of those funds to support that effort. But it would be a way of trying to go into this budget season with at least not having to transfer that important operational part to the budget right away. So I don't know. Again, no decisions need to be made this evening. I think if you're comfortable, we'll work on moving forward with what it would take to get approval, but have a final decision from the board at the October 25th meeting.
Nancy had a question.
No, I was just gonna ask
And
if the stakeholder feedback was specific and if you were willing to share that with us, so we could sort of say, if what we're doing is looking at this.
So I think, again, it was, relative to, maybe class size reduction, nursing, increasing nursing staff, and some teaching materials, and then paraeducators. There was limited information how that would impact directly, just more of an increase, the paraeducators. But I think some desire to reduce some class sizes. And also.
And the stakeholders were parents, teachers.
So some of that came from professional staff.
Okay.
Thank you. In situations like this, language is very, very important. And I very much like the idea of a more comfortable building. Even more than that, I adore the idea of a healthier and more comfortable building.
That would be the goal.
Yeah.
Let's articulate that as the goal.
It's Mark and Charlie. Mark?
The school has an ETF, for buildings and grounds that was used significantly for the new track and football field. Are we comfortable with the amount that we have remaining in that ETF to take us through the next year? Are there any plans to add to that expendable trust fund for buildings and grounds?
So I think during the budget process, what I would at a minimum recommend to the board is that you consider putting funds into that expendable trust through fund balance. As you know, you've done that in the past, so that's a separate warrant article. I think, quite frankly, now you have to start saving to replace the turf field again and the track. Like that is a reality. That I think you want to grow that. I think that's been a very smart process that the community and board and administration having those expendable trusts. Again, there could be a major failure of something. You know, we've had that happen, and having those funds is, very helpful. But, being able to grow that on a consistent basis. In the past, the board has also raised funds, like in terms of raised in the warrant article, so increased taxes to add to the fund. This may not be the year to do that, and try to see if there's any fund balance, which most likely will not be anywhere near what we've had in the last couple of years.
Charlie, you had a question?
Just comment, Brian, I think you did a great job on overseeing this problem. It's important. It's great. We have a very good contract to trust. Good. So,
We move on to the 2023-2024 budget goals for a discussion item. That's attachment 4.
So I thought it might just be helpful, trying to see if I am laying anything out in the right direction as we prepare to build the 23-24 budget. So I'll just highlight that I think our goal that I would propose is that if we have retirements, if we're able to fill those responsibilities within our current staff, that should be our objective. We may run into some quirks relative to certification or something like that, but I think that there are opportunities here with our decreased enrollment. I did add, the reality is that would increase class sizes. It may need to shift some staff from one building to another building. So that, I think is a reality. It would have an impact in terms of maybe where somebody's working. It may have an impact of how many students are in the class. I did summarize below, but I've also attached the school board policy on class size, which very much mimics the New Hampshire's minimum standards relative to class size. So that's one objective that I'm proposing. And then next, I think the reality is deferred maintenance catches up with you. And the reality is $1 in maintenance today is probably $10 in maintenance down the road if it's deferred. So
what happens is, Mary, deferred maintenance becomes an emergency fix.
yes,
And that's like $100.
yes,
Right, Trish?
that's right. So I would like to propose that we maintain, we bring forward at least a budget with the one that shows that we can maintain our facility, including last year, I believe it was about $125,000 we had budgeted for infrastructure. And that infrastructure, those funds have been used to fix, quite frankly, Interlakes Elementary School, which started to kind of go through in the back, a sinkhole, as well as accessibility issues to the playground. We now have a very accessible playground, which when you think about it being 2022, the reality is it is now accessible to all students, and that has been a challenge. So I would like to at least bring forward a budget that supports keeping the campus moving forward with accessibility and infrastructure, as well as maintaining the facilities. At this point, bringing forward a budget that is aiming to, maintain our current programming, and field experiences, with the hope that there will be savings because we will have reduced FTEs because we won't fill retirements. I'm hoping there may be a balance. Recognizing energy goods have increased. There are some things that are out of our control relative to fuel and cost of items have gone up because of that. And then, certainly seeking reasonable solutions to reduce costs. And so with that, we would work to try to bring forward as reasonable of a budget, and then certainly the work, and conversation that follows may further reduce it. But this is at least a starting point, and I want to make sure that that is at least in alignment maybe with the board's thinking before we get to work, and that you are comfortable with trying to fulfill responsibilities and positions with remaining staff as we look at, potential retirements or people leaving.
Yes, John.
Yeah, I think this is a great way to go, man. It's reasonable all the way around. And that's what the best we can hope for with this fighting declining enrollment. Sort of like the worst thing to happen at school. is declining
I know, but we want children.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Do you, well, maybe it's, there's something in here about class sizes, right? So
Yes.
Right.
because these are pretty large numbers for
Yeah,
classes.
so those would be,
Unusually large
what I would
for us, I would think.
say, well, right now, our seventh grade class, I think, is 86 students or so. So we have 4 content area teachers. So truthfully, 7th and 8th grade typically have the highest class sizes because they see all students within that grade level. And, in terms of a day. But, we do have, an elementary class right now is at 22. We have others that are at 13.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it does vary. I think, again, as I look at right now where we are, particularly at Interlakes Elementary School, we have a couple larger classes towards the end of their journey at ILES. And we've had several small classes coming in. So, that does have a shift. And I do think that with retirements, there will be some opportunities that hopefully we can do that all through attrition.
Any other questions? Okay, moving on to the contribution assurance program for fiscal year 2024 through 2026 for the property and liability program. That's attachment number 5, the climax in your packet.
Second?
Okay. Any questions with this? Yes.
I would just ask Trish if there's any additional or new information.
No.
Thank you.
Okay then,
Perfect question.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Policy, second reading and adoption, action item, which is attachments 6 through 13. Motion to approve the second reading and adoption of the policies as amended. Do we have any,
So, second.
okay, I guess we're doing all of them together. Is that okay, guys?
Yes.
As per policy 132, 4155, 5119, 5142, 5147, 6140, 6140.1, and 6171.2. Is there any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
With gratitude for the work of that committee.
Right,
I made the
that's-
motion.
that's-
You made the motion, Martha?
Mark
And who seconded it?
Charlie.
Charlie seconded.
Thank you.
Okay, additional business, members of the board? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At last meeting, we were given information indicating an effort at the state level to eliminate cooperative school districts in the state of New Hampshire. I have some additional information on that I'd appreciate being able to share with the board. And we'll do so most briefly. It involves a number of names. So Ben, what I please understand it's a loan.
We'll make a copy.
Anyway, specifically House Bill 1679. And its creator was Representative Cordelli, Carroll County. The additional sponsors are Representative Piamonte of Rockingham, Representative Torosian of Rockingham, Representative J. Smith of Carroll, and Senator Ward, District 8. I assume that's Manchester, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure I do.
Yeah. And the bill reads, the one sentence analysis. This bill requires cooperative school districts to review and adopt dissolution plans prior to January 1st, 2024, and it repeals all authority for cooperative school districts on June 30th, 2025. Now, I don't want you to feel that we're being picked on in particular, because this has impact across the state to a degree that you have to appreciate. Part of the analysis of this bill involves the fact that, and this is Department of Education information, let's see, where do I want to begin with this? I'll just read that sentence. The Department of Education is unable to determine this bill's potential impact on local school district revenues or expenditures, but does state there are 30 regional cooperative school districts covering 117 towns. The department assumes that 27 of these towns are part of a 2-school district and would be absorbed by their pre-existing elementary district. That's a very cautious thing to think. This would result in a net gain of 90 new school districts in the state of New Hampshire. The shorthand version is they're going to eliminate cooperative school districts and replace them with 90 individual school districts.
Our legislature has done this in the past, not specifically on this school choice issue. I mean, now I know why they dated 1679, because that's about vintage of thinking involved here. It would be impossible to execute. We don't even have building funds to improve our buildings, let alone build 90 new school buildings
I agree.
or staff. I mean, who do we send our hate mail to?
I agree completely that it is a rogue elephant effort, and I see absolutely no chance of its passing. At the same time, I see great value in having it in our minutes so that our public can read what's happening and who's doing it.
I felt the same way about this a year ago, but it was not tabled. So I'm a little more cautious than you are. about I think, ignorance and lack of understanding and who reads our minutes, who reads our, could result in something like this happening. I would hope that you're right, that there's just no way that, because, even if you could come up with a dissolution plan, what would happen to the funds from the school district? What would happen? I mean, the mere thought of Sandwich having to create its own K-12 school.
I just,
And,
It would be problematic.
the
'cause
logistics are so mind-boggling, but
They talked
it
about,
wasn't tabled, and I don't understand why it was sent back into committee for further research.
it's an unfortunate use of time on the part of our legislators. There's no other way.
But that's always.
And
well, they
there
didn't think
will
that.
always be, but this is of a scale that I've not seen before. I mean, the potential here is just, it's beyond alarming. I had to think to myself, how could I possibly resign from the state of New Hampshire? I mean,
Well, that's their,
Don't forget, Howard, last year there was a bill for New Hampshire to secede from the United States.
that's what I was gonna say,
Don't
that's
get go
probably
there.
the goal.
That's exactly correct.
I mean,
There is a chance that something much like this, perhaps of diminished dimension, could pass and be quite damaging.
What do you do with those towns that don't have a building? They've been paying into a cooperative, like Santa
right.
Harbor, for instance.
They'd have to-
It's not gonna
The
happen.
town that has the building would have to come up with funds to compensate, and
Well,
it's so wasteful and it's so grotesque that
Well, and
it beggars belief.
Right.
exactly. And if you just stop to think about the genesis of cooperative school districts, the whole purpose was the ability to increase the scope and the quality of education for our children. That's what cooperative school districts do.
Through scale.
They also give you an economy of scale. That's exactly correct, John.
It's the problem we're facing on the other direction.
right now,
That's right,
exactly.
Right.
That's right. You know,
Mark, go ahead.
Well, and this is not directly related, but the issue of school choice is going to be with us. The road that gets taken relative to that issue is going to be different in different kinds or places within the state of New Hampshire. Southern tier, Concord South, you've got the density. You may be able to do something that we certainly couldn't do up in the Lakes region or in the North Country. But school choice as a subject of conversation is still out there, and I suspect will be out there for the duration.
the history of school choice in this state has resulted in options for children in which the staff are less qualified, in which education becomes confused with doctrine, and in which services for children, especially those with extreme needs, are not met very well. It's not all alternatives, but the vast majority. We have a legislature that would temporarily certify something less than minimum in terms of standards.
Well, thank you, Howard, for bringing this up.
What a downer.
I know.
Sorry.
Okay, moving on to the agenda here. Is there any additional business with members of the administration? Okay, moving down to the announcements. Tuesday, October 25th, there's an Interlakes board meeting here at the Humiston Building at 6 p.m. Tuesday, November 8th, Interlakes School Board here at the Humiston Building, and a special school board meeting at 6 p.m. And any, I guess, further public comments at this point? Yes, Chris.
Yeah, if I can go back, actually, SAU 8 is Concord, Deerfield, Pennacook.
Thank you.
If I could go back to the HVAC for a second and the lesser funds, do we know that 100% of the cost would be ESSER funded? Is that a fact?
I believe it will all pass through their construction process and that it would be funded
So it's a
fully.
taxpayer impact.
Correct.
Okay, that's number one. Number two is Mr. Swanko was mentioning doing balancing either February or June. There's a 4-month difference there, and I just put out there, there's a budget padding of 10%. Timing might be padded as well because of supply chain ordering issues, whatever. Point being, if it happens in February, you have 4 months more to execute the project, order materials, potentially lesser cost and so forth, as opposed to June. And now you're starting the project later in time, running into potentially now winter if you're on doing roof systems in the middle of winter versus doing roof systems in the summertime. So I just throw that out there if you're putting it on the agenda for 2 weeks from now. And maybe it's a question, does that 4-month window matter? I don't need an answer. I'm just throwing it out for consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public input? Mr. Parsons?
Just refreshing, I see none.
Okay,
Motion to adjourn, Madam.
we have to close the public input at,
6:58.
thank you. Okay, the,
Motion to adjourn.
Charlie, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Oh.
That was good.
Thanks,
A
Paul.
lot of information there.
Hey.
Go home now.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Lisa, I need your signature on this CAP agreement.
I won't see you for a couple weeks.
Who has the manifest?
Do you want to